So the next time you type out a text message, I just want you to stop for a second.
Just pause before you hit send.
Right, exactly. Stop and look really closely at the emojis you're about to send. I mean, we use them constantly, right?
Oh, yeah, nonstop.
You send a smiley face, a thumbs up, maybe like a peach or an eggplant if you're, joking around with friends.
Right, it's visual shorthand.
Exactly. We think of them as this super modern shorthand, a really quick, convenient way to convey a thought or a joke without having to type out the actual words.
Yeah, you're basically bypassing the alphabet to deliver an immediate concept.
But so what if the everyday characters we use, like the fundamental building blocks of an entire written language, are doing exactly the same thing?
But on a much, much more massive historical scale.
Right. What if the earliest written characters weren't just abstract symbols, but literal graphic blueprints of human anatomy?
That is, well, it's a wild thought.
It really is. And not just anatomy, but blueprints of a society where women ruled and men were literally, and I mean literally, just tallies on a ledger.
Yeah, that is the profound and honestly somewhat unsettling reality that we are unpacking today.
Because it completely flips how you look at text.
It really does. We're looking at a system of language that didn't just represent ideas in some disconnected, abstract way. It actually encoded the biological, physical, and political reality of the ancient people who invented it.
And that is the exact mission of today's deep dive. We have this incredible stack of materials on the table today.
We've got a lot to get through.
We really do. We're looking at deep archaeological reports, meticulous character evolution charts.
The charts are fascinating, by the way.
Oh, they're amazing. Tracking the ancient forms of Chinese writing over millennia. And on top of that, we have extensive analyses of a highly controversial ancient text called the Earth Mother Sutra.
Right. And our goal here is to really synthesize these materials to decode a buried civilization.
Because all of it, the text, the artifacts, it all points toward this massive fundamental shift in the structure of human society, right?
Exactly. Specifically, it points to a brutal, highly contested transition of social power, moving from a matriarchy.
Where women had total control.
Right, where women held absolute, undisputed authority over resources and lineage. Moving from that to the patriarchal system that ultimately, took over.
But the wild thing is, we aren't tracking this ancient war through, broken swords or battlefield artifacts.
No, we're doing it through language.
Yeah. We are tracking it through the literal shapes of early Chinese characters and these strange, vivid clay objects used in ancient fertility cults.
We're basically going to explore how the physical shape of writing corresponds directly to the human body in early marriage systems.
And for you listening, as we go through all this evidence, the central question you really need to keep in focus, the mystery that these materials force us to confront, is this. How does a society rewrite its gods?
And how does it fundamentally alter the structure of its written language?
Exactly. When the entire balance of power flips completely upside down, how do they cover their tracks?
It's a huge question.
So I want to start right at the foundation. Let's look at the anatomy of the language itself.
Okay, let's do it.
According to the character evolution charts in our stack, we need to examine one of the most common foundational characters in the Chinese language. The character Ri.
Right, Ri.
Now, if you ask anyone who reads modern Chinese today what Ri means, what are they going to say?
They will tell you it means the sun. Or, it means day.
Right, it's just a standard polite word.
Yeah, it's foundational. You see it everywhere.
But the materials we have reveal a wildly different and frankly shocking original meaning for this character in its most ancient, primitive form.
It really is quite a leap from how we use it today.
It is.
Yeah.
So let's look at the visual evolution chart from the archaeological notes. Today, Ri is written as a tall, vertical rectangle with a horizontal line cutting through the middle.
Right, like a tall, skinny box.
Exactly. But in ancient times, it wasn't tall and skinny.
No, it wasn't.
It was drawn very flat and very long, a horizontal rectangle with a line through the middle.
And that flat, elongated shape is the crucial key to unlocking the original meaning.
So what did it mean?
Well, the linguistic analysis in our materials argues that in the era of the early matriarchal clans, this symbol had absolutely nothing to do with the sun in the sky.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. It specifically referred to, and I'm translating directly from the notes here, a woman's boudoir.
Her private central chamber.
Exactly. The woman's boudoir.
Well, wait, hold on. Let me just play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Because I'm looking at this flat box on the chart. You're telling me the most basic word for the sun was originally a drawing of a woman's bedroom.
That is what the sources argue, yes.
That just seems like a massive leap to me. I mean, how did the linguistic archaeologists in these materials actually prove that this flat rectangle wasn't just a squished circle meant to be the sun?
Right. Why couldn't it just be a badly drawn sun?
Yeah. How do we know it's a room?
It's a really valid question. And to understand the answer, we have to look at the mechanism of how ancient written language was actually constructed.
Okay.
We have to introduce a fundamental philosophical concept of ancient China. It's called the unity of heaven and humanity.
Oh, right.
Tian Ren He.
Yeah, I've heard that phrase before.
Yeah.
Usually in the context of, like, Taoism or just a general be one with nature vibe.
Right, exactly. Today we kind of treat it as a vague spiritual aesthetic.
Like a yoga class mantra.
Yeah, exactly. But in the context of the people who were inventing the very first written characters, it was not a loose philosophy at all.
It was more literal.
It was a rigid, functional rule of creation. The materials quote the operational logic of this era directly. They say, if there is text, there must be a shape. If there is a shape, there must be a body.
If there is a shape, there must be a body.
Oh!
Wow.
Yeah.
So writing wasn't arbitrary at all.
Not even a little bit. Modern alphabets are totally arbitrary. Like the letter A doesn't look like an apple.
Right. It's just a shape we all agreed makes an ah sound.
Exactly. But these ancient creators were not dealing in abstract geometry. They were drawing the world exactly as they experienced it, mapped directly onto their own physical bodies.
The body is the lens for the whole universe.
Yes. The universe is reflected in the body, and the body is reflected in the text. There was no separation between the observer, their environment, and the language they used to describe it.
Okay, so if we apply that rule, the rule that a shape must have a literal body, what does that actually mean for our flat rectangle, the Ri character?
Well, it means that this flat rectangular character for the boudoir was not just representing the architectural blueprint of a room in a house.
Okay.
It was a direct, literal anatomical representation of female genitalia.
Wow.
The vulva, the physical origin of life.
Okay, let me just make sure I'm wrapping my head around this entirely.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. So the ancient foundational character for a private room was literally a drawing of female anatomy.
Yes.
Because in their worldview, the biological body of the matriarch and the physical space she commanded were conceptually the exact same thing.
That is precisely what the textual analysis is arguing. You really have to put yourself in the mindset of a society where the mother is the absolute center of survival.
Right.
The space of generation, the space of female authority, and the biological origin of the clan's life. These were not distinct concepts to them.
They were all just one thing.
They were all encapsulated in that single, flat, rectangular symbol.
Oh.
The boudoir was the womb of the household, and the womb was the boudoir of the body.
It was the absolute unquestioned center of their world.
Exactly.
That is heavy. It's fascinating, but it's just a radically different way of experiencing language than we're used to.
It definitely changes how you look at the page.
And what I find incredibly compelling in these materials is that this isn't just a dead theory, you know?
Right. There's proof that carried over.
Yeah. The notes point out a linguistic footprint that has survived for thousands of years to back this up.
It's amazing that it survived.
It is. A footprint that exists right now in modern slang.
Yes. Language is incredibly stubborn.
It really is.
You know, you can change the official dictionary all you want, but the semantic DNA of a word often survives in the vernacular, the way people actually talk on the street.
So the materials point to a very common, very vulgar, modern slang term. People say worry.
Yes.
Which over centuries apparently evolved into the modern pronunciation of the swear word cow.
Which is a word heavily associated with the physical act of reproduction.
Right.
And it's usually used in a very derogatory, aggressive, or dismissive way today. It's basically the equivalent of the F word in English.
Right. But the linguistic tracking in our materials traces the roots of that exact slang directly back to this ancient matriarchal concept.
It's quite the journey for a word.
It originally referred to the physical female reproductive organ and the boudoir itself.
It's a perfect example of linguistic degradation.
So explain that mechanism to us. How does a sacred matriarchal symbol become a modern dirty word? How does that happen?
Well, think about what happens when one regime violently overthrows another.
Okay.
The high-status symbols of the old regime are deliberately degraded by the new regime. It's intentional.
I see.
If the boudoir, the Ri, was the ultimate symbol of female power and authority, a patriarchal society taking over cannot let that stand.
Because it threatens their new power structure.
Exactly. They reassign the character to mean something universal and powerful in the sky, the sun.
So they sanitize it for the official records.
Right, but the original physical, anatomical meaning doesn't just vanish from the cultural memory. It gets pushed down into the dirt.
It becomes a taboo.
It becomes vulgar. It becomes a swear word. The linguistic degradation of the word completely mirrors the political degradation of the women who originally owned it.
That makes so much sense. It's like finding out that the most common insult people hurl in traffic today was actually the highest title of authority a few millennia ago.
It's wild when you frame it like that.
It really is wild.
But it shows you that when we look at these ancient texts, we aren't just looking at the evolution of grammar.
No.
We are looking at the fossilized remains of political warfare.
Okay, so we have established the base here. We have the flat rectangular box, the re representing the woman's boudoir and her literal anatomy.
Right.
It is the center of power. But this immediately raises a structural question for me.
What's that?
If this flat rectangle is the room, the anatomical base, what happens to the written language when someone else enters that room?
That question leads us directly into the mechanics of how this matriarchal society actually functioned day to day.
Because they weren't just sitting in rooms alone.
No, definitely not. We have to understand that in this specific era, women weren't just respected as like symbolic figureheads. They were the absolute center of resource allocation.
They ran the economy.
Exactly. The entire clan, the entire economy of their community revolved around the maternal line.
And the materials make a really blunt, almost shockingly modern comparison here to explain the power dynamic.
They don't sugarcoat it.
They really don't. They say that in this ancient matriarchal society, women having multiple male partners wasn't a scandal at all. It was just the structural fact of life.
Right.
They compare it to modern wealthy individuals having the power to keep multiple mistresses or partners. The direct quote from the notes is, having power and money means you can do what you want.
You conjuring sing.
Wow.
It's a very colloquial, slightly cynical modern phrasing, but the analysts use it because it perfectly strips away the romanticism.
And gets right to the raw economic reality.
Exactly. The woman owned the boudoir. The Re character establishes that female base of power. Men in this specific historical window were essentially visitors, or additions to that space.
They were guests.
Yeah, they did not own the property, they did not carry the primary lineage, and they were permitted to enter that central space solely based on the matriarch's favor.
Okay, so if that's the social reality, how does the written language adapt to actually record it?
Well, we move to the second major part of our character evolution chart.
Let's do it. What happens to the symbols when a woman in this society begins taking partners?
The materials describe this life transition as women leaving the boudoir, or chuggi.
Tugi.
Now, we need to clarify that term immediately. It doesn't mean leaving the house forever or being married off to some other family, which is, of course, how later patriarchal societies would use similar phrasing.
Right, she's not being given away like property.
Exactly the opposite. In this context, leaving the boudoir means opening up her space. It means asserting her maturity, taking on a public matriarchal role in the clan, and officially taking husbands.
And the visual ledger they invented to document this is absolutely stunning in its simplicity.
It's incredibly straightforward.
We have a chart here from the archaeological notes that tracks this. It shows that original flat rectangular box. But now, when a woman takes a partner, they literally add a vertical line piercing down into the inside of the box.
It is the most literal, brutally efficient tracking system imaginable.
It's a spreadsheet.
It is. It is a visual ledger of an ancient marriage system known anthropologically as polyandry. Specifically, Yi duo Fuji.
Meaning one woman, multiple husbands.
Exactly.
I really want to spend some time on this because polyandry is a concept that is very rare in modern global societies.
It is.
And it might be hard for you listening to intuitively grasp how it functioned as the norm. So why would this society structure itself around one woman and multiple men? What is the practical mechanism behind it?
It usually comes down to economics and lineage clarity.
Okay, walk me through that.
In very early human societies, before the advent of massive surplus-generating agriculture, survival depended on incredibly tight communal cooperation.
Everyone had to work together just to eat.
Exactly. And biological reality dictates that maternity is always obvious.
Right. You literally watch the mother give birth.
Yes. while paternity, before modern genetics, was completely unprovable.
You always know who the mother is. You don't necessarily know who the father is.
Exactly. So if you want to build a stable society where property, resources, and leadership are passed down without bloody internal civil wars every generation, you trace everything through the mother.
The matriarch is the anchor.
She has to be. By having multiple husbands, a woman consolidates the labor and protection of several men into a single, unified household under her direction.
That's brilliant, honestly.
All children born belong to her lineage, her clan. The men work for the collective prosperity of that specific boudoir.
So it's a system entirely designed for stability and clear inheritance.
Come on.
Okay, so back to language. Let's walk through the literal math of how they recorded this polyandrous system in their writing.
Okay.
The materials explain that if you take that flat matriarchal box and you draw one single vertical line down through the center of it, it creates the character you.
Right.
And the phonetic analysis in our notes says that in ancient times, this was read as 1Q.
Meaning exactly one husband. One male partner has been officially recognized as entering the female space.
Got it. Then, if she takes a second husband, they update the ledger. If you add two vertical lines inside the box, it makes the character quo.
Yes, cool.
This was read as tu quo, meaning two husbands.
And this is such a fascinating linguistic pivot point right here.
How so?
Think about the character quo today. In modern Chinese, it means a song or a melody. Or it means something that is bent, curved, or twisted.
Right, like a winding road or a piece of music.
Exactly. But originally, according to the deep etymology we were looking at in these notes, it wasn't about music or curved lines at all.
It was math.
It was an accounting system. It was a visual tally of how many men a woman managed. The lines were the men, the box was the woman.
That is so literal.
The character quo in its original intent was literally just the number 2 inside a box.
It's basically a spreadsheet, but instead of an Excel file, it's a single written character.
It's data entry.
And the incredible thing is that this spreadsheet scales up. The materials bring up this fascinating concept of 7Q.
Right, the 7Q.
Imagine the flat box, but now there are 7 distinct vertical lines drawn inside it. This character represents a matriarch who has formerly married 7 men.
And the analysis of ancient myths within our stack of sources even references a 9Q.
9 husbands.
Yes. They point to lingering references in later mythology, like the residence of the 9-headed lion, which is called the 9-quo lingering cave.
Wait, I know that reference. That's from Journey to the West, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's usually just translated as a cave with a lot of winding, twisted paths.
Yeah, a cave with 9 curves. But when you apply the matriarchal cipher we are discussing right now, the 9-quo lingering cave takes on a vastly different original meaning.
Oh my God, of course.
In the context of this ancient language, 9Q meant a woman with 9 husbands.
And the cave is?
The cave is the boudoir.
Wow.
The mythology we read today as having literal winding pathways was originally describing a massive, complex, highly powerful, polyandrous household.
That is mind-blowing. The analysis is just so clear. The original structural meaning of this foundational character, Quay, is literally a woman in charge of the household.
Yes, a woman who manages the labor, the resources, and the reproductive capacity of multiple husbands.
I think it's helpful to try and map this onto our modern world, to really feel how alien yet incredibly functional it is.
Well, absolutely.
Imagine if our modern legal marriage certificates were just an evolving emoji. You start with a symbol of a house, a box, and every time you got married, the government didn't issue a new piece of paper. They just took your house emoji and drew another little stick figure inside of it.
A very crowded little emoji house.
Exactly. It seems almost primitive to us, just drawing lines in a box. But what it actually shows is how profoundly literal and deeply intertwined early writing was with their social structure.
We tend to think of writing as something invented by poets to write down stories or by philosophers to record ideas.
Right.
But initially, writing was invented by administrators to document reality, power, and ownership.
It was bureaucratic.
Completely. And in this specific reality, the women owned the space and the men were the tallies inside it.
Okay, so we have the theory down. We have the linguistic chart showing how vertical lines added to a horizontal box equaled an escalating number of husbands. It makes perfect logical sense on paper.
Right.
But here is where this deep dive goes from theoretical linguistics on a page to physical, literal dirt.
This is my favorite part.
Because we aren't just relying on dictionaries here. Archaeologists actually dug up the physical proof of this language.
Yes. The text provides the map of the society, but the artifact is the actual territory.
It's one thing to say they drew lines in a box. It's another thing entirely to hold the physical manifestation of that concept in your hands.
Exactly.
We are looking at the notes regarding a physical artifact excavated from the Uchisi archaeological site.
The Uchisi site, it's a major Neolithic settlement.
And among the findings, the materials highlight one specific, incredibly strange object that they call the seven-legged openwork vessel.
It is vital that we describe the physical dimensions and appearance of this object vividly for the listener.
Oh, definitely.
Because the visual impact of this artifact isn't just aesthetic, you know? The shape is the entire point of its existence.
Okay, I'm looking at the high-resolution photo from the archaeological report right now. Let me try to paint a picture for you. It's made of fired clay, a rich red-brown color.
Right.
It's clearly a ritualistic object, not something you'd use for everyday cooking. The bottom half of it is this bulbous, drum-like, rounded base. It looks very heavy, very grounded.
And pay attention to the side of it.
Yes. Right in the side of this rounded base, there's a very distinct, deliberate, perfectly circular hole carved into the clay.
That's the base structure.
Yep.
And then growing directly out of the top of this bulbous base are 7 long, solid, very sharp, pointed clay pillars.
They don't look like decorative handles at all.
No, not at all.
They reach straight up into the air like spikes or fingers. Honestly, looking at it without any context, it looks almost alien, or like some kind of ancient weapon, or, I don't know, an abstract art piece.
But when you apply the linguistic cipher we just learned...
The absolute rule of, if there is a shape, there must be a body.
Right. When you apply that, it stops being alien. It becomes shockingly visceral human.
So the archaeologists and textual analysts in our materials connect this artifact directly on a one-to-one basis with the character we were just discussing, right?
Yes. The 7Q.
The one horizontal box with 7 vertical lines inside.
Exactly. This clay vessel from the Uchisi site is the 3-dimensional physical manifestation of that written character.
Okay, let's unpack this completely, mechanism by mechanism, because it is the absolute core of the ancient fertility worship we are analyzing today.
Okay, let's break it down.
The materials break down the anatomy of the vessel piece by piece. The bulbous, rounded clay base with the deliberate circular hole, that represents the female reproductive organ.
Yes. It is the 3D version of the boudoir, the Re character.
And the 7 long, sharp, pointed clay pillars rising out of the top of it. Those represent 7 male reproductive organs.
So the 7 pillars physically inserted into and rising out of the single rounded base.
It is the literal physical embodiment of a woman with 7 husbands.
It is the 7Q character rendered in fired earth.
That is just incredible. It is the ultimate, undeniable symbol of ancient fertility worship.
And we really need to understand what fertility worship meant to them.
Right, because it's not what we picture today.
Not at all. Today, if we hear that term, we might picture people throwing flowers into a river and praying for a good harvest.
Like an agricultural thing?
Yeah. But for this matriarchal clan, fertility wasn't a metaphor for crops. It represented the raw biological reality of their polyandrous society.
Human reproduction was the engine.
Exactly. It was the engine of their clan's survival and power. When they performed rituals, they didn't use abstract symbols of grace or light. They used literal representations of biological reproduction.
Because that reproduction was the literal source of their political and societal authority.
Precisely.
What really stands out to me, and what I think is so fascinating about comparing this to modern times, is just how unapologetic and straightforward these ancient cultures were about biology.
They really didn't hide it.
No. You look at a modern religious or civic symbol, and it's almost always highly abstracted. An eagle, a star, a crescent moon, a geometric cross.
Right.
If you don't know the history of those symbols, you can't just look at them and instantly know how that society organizes its marriages or its power structures.
Modern symbols are heavily mediated. They are wrapped in layers of theology, philosophy, and centuries of debate.
They're designed to be interpreted.
Right.
But this 7-legged clay vessel, it leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. It is aggressively literal.
It's basically an ancient billboard.
Yes. It's saying, this is our power structure. 1 woman at the base, 7 men providing the labor and lineage. Here's the biology to prove it. It's incredible.
It forces us to confront how disconnected modern society has become from the visceral biological origins of our own social structures.
We're so far removed from it.
We are. For the people who built the Uchisi settlement, there was zero separation between the biological body, the governance of the state, the religion they practiced, and the language they wrote with.
It was all one continuous, undeniable reality.
The body was the state, and the state was the body.
But as we all know, history never stays still.
It certainly does not.
If this matriarchal power structure was so deeply entrenched, so powerful, that it was literally baked into the fired clay of their highest rituals and woven into the very ink of their foundational language, what happened?
That is the million-dollar question.
Why don't we still write Risteed as a flat box of female power? Why did polyandry vanish from the mainstream?
Because that reality was overthrown.
And according to the historical timeline reconstructed in our materials, this wasn't a peaceful transition of power.
No, it wasn't a gradual, polite cultural shift where people just slowly decided to try out a patriarchal model.
It was a war.
It was a violent war.
And to understand the mechanics of this war, we have to pivot from the archaeological artifacts, like the clay vessels, and look at the spiritual texts of this society.
We have to introduce the text at the center of this whole controversy.
Yes, the Earth Mother Sutra.
The Earth Mother Sutra. To understand the shift in power, we first have to understand who they were worshiping at the peak of the matriarchy.
Okay, so who was she?
Well, according to the textual analysis in our stack, this sutra was born directly out of these matriarchal clans. And in this belief system, the Earth Mother wasn't just a minor goddess of farming or a fertility spirit.
Right.
She was the supreme creator of everything in existence.
The materials state that according to this text, she created Fuxi, Nua, the 3 sovereigns, and the 5 emperors.
Which is huge.
For anyone who isn't deep into ancient Chinese mythology, those names are a massive deal. They are generally considered the foundational mythical ancestors of the entire Chinese civilization.
And this text is claiming that all of them, the very founders of humanity, came from her.
So she is the source code.
She is the source code. She is referred to in the texts by this incredible, very evocative title, The Gateway of the Mysterious Female.
The Gateway of the Mysterious Female.
Yeah.
Wow. That phrase echoes perfectly with the physical gateway of the clay vessel we just talked about, the deliberate hole in the base.
Yes, she was the ultimate cosmic boudoir from which the entire universe was born.
But as the analysts in our materials dig deeper into the Earth Mother Sutra, a very dark, very urgent tone emerges from the prose.
It's not just a happy creation story.
No. The analyst argues that the Earth Mother Sutra, in its current form, isn't just a passive creation myth. It functions as a desperate complaint.
It is a mythological accusation.
An accusation against who?
Against a rising, violently disruptive force, the emerging patriarchal society.
This is where the narrative shifts from anthropology to warfare. The materials we are reviewing neutrally report a deeply violent historical reality that is encoded just beneath the surface of this text.
Right. The patriarchal forces, men who wanted to invert the power structure, didn't just debate the matriarchs in a public forum.
They probably wanted to control surplus wealth and establish male inheritance lines, right?
Exactly. Driven by shifts in agricultural technology. And they violently overthrew the matriarchal clans.
The notes state explicitly that the patriarchal forces actively hunted down those who believed in the Earth Mother Sutra.
They pursued and purged the matriarchal leadership.
It was a bloody, ruthless era of transition. To use a linguistic metaphor we started with, the men were taking over the boudoir by force.
And erasing the original owners.
And what is the mechanism of taking over a society? You don't just take the physical land and the resources. You have to take the history.
Because if you leave the history intact, you leave the justification for rebellion.
Exactly. You must control the narrative. The victors write the history books, and they define what is sacred and what is heresy.
And the materials point out the tragic, calculated aftermath for the Earth Mother Sutra.
What happened to it?
Later generations, now entirely controlled by the new patriarchal system, looked at this foundational text. They saw a text that explicitly stated a woman created the universe, and that female authority was the natural order of the cosmos.
They couldn't have that.
No, so they dismissed it. The patriarchal authorities officially labeled the Earth Mother Sutra as a fake, or a pseudo-sutra.
The pseudo-sutra.
Wei Jing! They delegitimized it entirely.
But they couldn't erase the memory of it entirely from the minds of the common people? Right, because it was too deeply ingrained.
Exactly. So they did the next best thing. They categorized it as heresy. They framed it as false history fabricated by ignorant people.
That's a classic tactic.
It is. And the analyst in our sources argues forcefully that this labeling of pseudo-sutra is a massive historical distortion. It wasn't fake. It was just the scripture of the losing side.
Labeling it as fake was a political act of suppression.
Yes. a mechanism to cement male authority. And the analyst argues this needs to be corrected if we are ever going to understand the true matriarchal origins of human society.
It's a chillingly effective strategy. They didn't just kill the earthly leaders of the matriarchy, they killed the Divine Mother herself by erasing her legitimacy.
But this brings up a really complex logistical problem for the new male rulers.
Oh, definitely. You can overthrow the queens, you can rewrite the dictionary so Re means the sun instead of the boudoir, and you can officially label their holy books as fake.
Right.
But you cannot just erase thousands of years of deep-seated religious belief overnight.
People don't just forget.
No. The common people are still going to worship at those temples. They are still going to pray to those ancient female gods for reign and survival.
And that is the ultimate administrative headache for any conquering regime.
Seriously. If you outright ban the local gods, you spark a holy war that could unseat you immediately.
Exactly. And that leads us to one of the most fascinating mechanisms of cultural survival and dominance that the materials discuss.
The ancient Chinese concept of flexible adaptation.
Beyond.
Flexible adaptation.
Oh.
So if they can't delete the female gods, what do the new patriarchal rulers do with them?
They give them a divine makeover.
A makeover.
Yes. They alter the identities of the gods just enough to fit the new patriarchal power dynamics while keeping the familiar names, the geographic locations, and the basic rituals intact.
So the common people keep worshiping without realizing the fundamental theology has been inverted.
Exactly. It is the ultimate corporate rebranding campaign, but applied to the divine.
And the materials give us the perfect mind-bending example of this process in action. It's a transition I'm calling the Wenchang flip.
Oh, it is a brilliant piece of historical detective work by the analysts.
So walk us through the Wenchang flip.
Let's go back to that physical artifact, the seven-legged vessel, the 7Q clay object.
Okay, the one with the hole and the 7 pillars.
Right. The materials reveal a crucial piece of geographic context. This specific type of artifact was actually the ancestral symbol of a place called Keek Mountain.
Keek Mountain, meaning 7 Quiet Mountain.
Yes. And the materials emphasize that this location is incredibly significant in broader Chinese culture.
Extremely significant.
Right.
Because Keekwah Mountain is the universally recognized original ancestral home of Wenchang, or Wangguo.
The immensely famous, deeply revered deity of culture, literature, and examinations.
Right. For centuries, if you were a scholar wanting to pass the Imperial Civil Service exams and secure a government job, you prayed to Wenchang.
He was the guy. And traditionally, for the last several thousand years, Wenchang Bijin is depicted in all the temples and paintings as a very dignified, scholarly, bearded male deity.
He is the absolute epitome of patriarchal scholarly authority.
But the materials drop an absolute bombshell right here.
This blew my mind.
Based on the archaeological evidence of the matriarchal 7-legged vessels buried at his ancestral mountain, the original deity of Keek Mountain, the entity that eventually became Wenchang Dijin, the god of literature, was originally female.
The god of literature was a goddess.
Yeah.
And not just a generic goddess, but specifically a matriarchal goddess representing the 7Q polyandrous system. A goddess who managed 7 husbands. Massive revelation. I am having a hard time picturing how they pulled off that transition, though. I mean, how do you take a goddess famous for having a harem of 7 men and turn her into a stuffy male bureaucrat reading a book?
Well, you have to look at the mythological prototypes.
Okay.
The materials link the original female Wenchang to mythological figures like Hishangu of the 8 Immortals.
Right.
The underlying prototype for these figures in the deep past was a matriarch who married 7 men. But as the patriarchal revolution took hold and men claimed total exclusive control over society, over the government, and crucially over literature and writing.
They faced a massive ideological problem.
A huge one.
Because if the men control the government and the government runs unwritten exams, they can't have the ultimate patron god of those exams be a symbol of female dominance.
Exactly. It would fundamentally contradict the new social order they were violently enforcing.
You cannot have a patriarchal bureaucracy praying to a polyandrous matriarch for success.
No, it undermines the entire ideological foundation of their rule.
So Wenchang was quietly, over generations, transitioned.
Yes. The local goddess was given male attributes, a new backstory, and transformed into a male deity to perfectly align with the new male-dominated social norms.
They kept the sacred mountain, they kept the immense power and popularity of the deity to keep the locals happy, but they completely flipped the gender.
It is the absolute pinnacle of flexible adaptation. You co-opt the indigenous power center and you just rewrite its core identity.
It's ruthless.
But the beauty of archaeology is that the physical artifacts, like the seven-legged vessel buried deep in the dirt at Keek Mountain, remain as fossilized proof of the original truth.
The text was rewritten, but the clay remembers.
Precisely.
Okay, so Wenchang gets a gender flip and a massive promotion to the male god of imperial literature. But what did the patriarchy do to the supreme creator? What happened to the Earth Mother, the gateway of the mysterious female who supposedly birthed the universe?
Her fate, as laid out in the materials, is honestly tragic.
It really is. It is a severe, calculated demotion.
They couldn't completely erase the Earth Mother because the connection between the Earth and agricultural survival was just too primal.
Right. People need the Earth.
So she didn't disappear. Instead, she was shrunk down. She was aggressively minimized.
How minimized are we talking?
Well, in the later patriarchal religious iconography that we still see today, the Supreme Earth Mother was transformed into two small, subservient attendant boys.
Wait, really?
Yes. These two boys are depicted standing on either side of the newly male Wenchang Dijin, basically serving him.
Wait, let me just get this straight.
Well,
the entity that created the entire universe and all the foundational gods was turned into two little altar boys holding books for the guy who stole her mountain.
yes, that is exactly what happened.
That is just...
And it gets deeper, because their names are not random. The names they were given carry profound, deliberate, symbolic weight.
Okay, what are their names?
These two attendant boys are officially known as Heavenly Deaf and Earthly Mute.
Heavenly Deaf and Earthly Mute.
Tianlong and Dia.
This is where the detective work in the materials we were reviewing reaches a level of complexity that is just staggering to me.
It's brilliant analysis.
Why make them deaf and mute? Why not just call them Good Boy 1 and Good Boy 2?
Right, there has to be a reason.
To decode this, the analysts bring in another fascinating physical artifact from the exact same Uchisi archaeological site where we found the seven-legged polyandry vessel.
Yes, they found a specific clay bird, and the archaeological context explicitly identifies this bird as a physical representation of the Earth Mother.
Let me describe this bird artifact for you because, again, the physical details are the key to the mystery here.
The details matter?
They do. It is not a normal, pristine, beautiful bird. It is intentionally deformed by the ancient sculptor who made it. The clay bird is entirely missing an ear, which clearly symbolizes deafness. And it has a deliberate, cleanly pierced hole poked right through his throat, which symbolizes muteness.
So we have a physically deaf and mute representation of the Earth Mother buried in the dirt.
But to understand the mechanism of why the patriarchy chose deafness and muteness to neutralize her, we have to bridge archaeology with traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM.
This is where that ancient concept of mapping the universe to the human body, if there is a shape, there must be a body, comes roaring back into play.
Right. And I really need you to explain this carefully because my modern Western understanding of biology says my stomach is in my gut and my ears are on my head, and they don't have much to do with each other.
That's a fair point.
How does TCM explain the deaf and mute bird?
Okay, so in ancient Chinese medical theory, the body is not just a collection of isolated parts. It is a networked system of energy, or qi, flowing through pathways called meridians.
Okay, meridians.
And crucially, the external sensory organs, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, are believed to be directly connected to and governed by the major internal organ systems.
Ah, so they're linked.
Yes. Deafness and muteness in this context are not just random physical disabilities, they are deliberate cultural symbols pointing to specific internal organs, the spleen and the stomach.
Okay, break down that mapping for me based on the material.
Sure. The notes break it down perfectly based on TCM meridian theory. The stomach meridian is believed to have pathways that connect up to the ear.
Okay.
Therefore, a profound problem with the ear, resulting in deafness, points symbolically directly to the stomach.
Okay, so stomach equals ear. What about muteness?
The spleen meridian connects upward to the root of the tongue and the throat. So, an inability to speak or muteness points directly to the spleen.
So let me get this straight. When the patriarchy structurally demoted the Supreme Earth Mother and split her into the two attendant boys, Heavenly Deaf and Earthly Mute, they weren't just giving them quirky names.
No, they definitely were not.
They were turning the Earth Mother into symbolic walking representations of the human spleen and the human stomach.
Exactly.
But why those specific organs? I mean, why turn the mother of the universe, the gateway of creation, into the digestive tract?
Because of the foundational elemental associations in ancient Chinese cosmology.
The elements.
Yes, the 5 elements: theory, wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Every organ belongs to an element. And the spleen and the stomach both belong to the element of earth. They are the central organs of the body, responsible for digesting food and grounding the body's energy.
Oh, I see the logic now. The Earth Mother was fundamentally, inescapably tied to the soil, the ground, the earth.
Right.
By reducing her to the spleen and stomach, the patriarchal system acknowledged her elemental nature like she is still earth. But they stripped her of her cosmic creative supremacy.
Precisely. They took away her higher functions. They rendered her silent and deaf, incapable of receiving prayers or speaking decrees. They reduced her purely to the metabolic digestive function of the earth. She's generating basic energy, but utterly lacking in agency or authority.
She went from being the architect of the universe to being a silent, metabolic servant to the new male god of literature.
It is a breathtakingly complex and honestly incredibly cruel mythological subjugation.
It really is. They didn't just kill her. They systematically dismantled her identity, took away her voice, grounded her in digestion rather than divine creation, and made her hold the books for the guy who stole her power.
It's profound, and just to tie a perfect, unassailable linguistic bow on top of this entire analysis, the materials provide one final, deep character breakdown.
I love this part.
This connects all the threads: the Earth Mother, the matriarchal boudoir, and the physical earth.
This is the ultimate proof of how tightly woven this ancient code really is.
Go for it.
The materials explain that according to ancient cosmological tracking, the Earth Mother bird we just talked about is fundamentally made of what is called Wu Genji Earth.
Wu Ji too.
Right. Now, we need to briefly explain what Wu and Ji means, because it's a highly technical concept.
It is. In ancient China, they used a complex system to track time, years, and elements called the heavenly stems and earthly branches.
Right. There are 10 heavenly stems in total.
It's basically their ancient calendar and elemental classification system.
Okay.
Yes. And each of those 10 stems is assigned to one of the 5 elements. The stems named Wu and Ji are the 2 specific stems that are assigned to the element of earth.
Okay, so they represent the central grounding soil.
Exactly. So Wu and Ji earth is the ultimate technical designation for the pure earth element. It is the core essence of the Earth Mother.
Okay, so we have Wu and Ji earth. Now, the materials ask us to look back at the Chinese character for boudoir, the very first concept we talked about, the space of female power.
Right. The Ri character's successor, basically.
Exactly. The modern character for boudoir is Gi.
I want you to visualize the structure of this character, Gi.
If you look at how it is written, the outer shell of the character is the symbol for a door or men.
Yes.
And what is sitting inside that door, it is literally 2 earth characters.
Yeah.
2 stacked on top of each other.
2 earths enclosed inside the door.
The Wu and Ji earth.
The essence of the Earth Mother.
The boudoir. The female anatomy.
Yeah.
The foundational elements of the soil that grow the crops.
They are all perfectly, intricately, and undeniably linked in the very stroke order of the language.
It all connects. It's just this unbroken chain. We started with the flat horizontal character of the boudoir, representing the anatomical base of power.
Right.
We explored the mechanics of polyandry, seeing how vertical lines were added to create a literal ledger of husbands.
We saw the physical reality of that ledger in the red clay of the 7-legged fertility vessel.
And then we witnessed the complete collapse of that system. The massive societal war where the ruling matriarchs were overthrown, their supreme earth mother goddess systematically demoted, rendered deaf and mute, reduced to digestive organs, and their sacred history rewritten and banned as a pseudo-sutra.
It's an entire civilization hidden in plain sight. What this deep dive fundamentally shows us is that symbols are never just arbitrary symbols.
They never are.
When you look at written language, when you read an ancient myth, or even when you are just walking through a museum and looking at a weird spiky clay pot behind a piece of glass, you are not just looking at art.
No.
You are looking at an active, unresolved crime scene of history.
You are looking at the fossilized remains of ancient power struggles.
Exactly. The people who won those wars didn't just take the throne and the grain silos, they took the dictionary. They took the gods.
They engaged in a total, comprehensive rewrite of reality, right down to the shape of the literal letters used to describe that reality.
It is the ultimate exercise of power, dictating the terms by which reality can even be spoken about.
It really is. And that leaves us with a final, lingering thought for you to mull over as you go about your day.
Something to keep in mind.
We've just spent this time seeing how an entire matriarchal civilization was completely overwritten by a patriarchy. We saw how they changed the gender of the gods, how they changed the fundamental meaning of words from human anatomy to the sun and the sky, and how they buried the original truth deep in the dirt of Keek Mountain.
They buried it deep.
So I want you to look around at the world today. Look at the modern slang you use with your friends. Look at the emojis you send without thinking. Look at the symbols printed on your money, the architecture of your government buildings, and the unchangeable historical truths we all accept as basic facts.
Because none of it is accidental.
No. If the history of the world were to flip completely upside down tomorrow, if a new power structure took over and needed to rewrite reality to justify their rule, which of our deeply held beliefs, which of our sacred texts, and which of our scientific facts would be violently rewritten and permanently labeled as a pseudo-sutra by the people of the future?
And when the archaeologists of the year 5000 dig up our hard drives and our monuments, which of our symbols will they look at and realize they've been reading the history of our power structures all wrong?
It's definitely something to think about the next time you tap that little emoji house on your phone.